Incense burning, all space is filled with the fragrance. All Buddhas smell it from afar. Auspicious clouds gather everywhere. With utmost sincerity, all Buddhas appear. We pay homage and offer clouds of incense to the Bodhisattvas and the Mahasattvas. We pay homage and offer clouds of incense to the Bodhisattvas and the Mahasattvas. We pay homage, we offer clouds of incense to the Bodhisattvas and the Mahasattvas.
Okay. When I first saw my name on the calendar to present, I thought, oh, not me. But I'm grateful to Venerable Panuati for knowing that by doing this, I would take a deep dive and grow. I want to start by sharing some of my background path that may seem weird to you guys, but it's from poetry to quantum physics. So I was raised in the Episcopal Church in Glasgow, Virginia, which is the same Blue Ridge mountain range that we live in. It's where the James and the Maury rivers meet. And although I left the Episcopal Church and all organized religion at age 18 when I graduated from high school, I'm grateful for many parts of the training. The fact that I humbled myself kneeling in prayer, that act, finding more spiritual connection with others, and a sense of having something like the Holy Spirit inside me. Fear not, for I am with you, still comes to my mind when I'm in distress and difficulty. For the next several decades, I leaned towards Native American faith, Druidism, humanism, and I came to believe in a power greater than myself who was not a puppeteer. Reflecting back, I believe the spiritual thread that led me to Buddhism was my love of poetry and quotes. Both of my parents read and recited poetry to me. I am drawn to poems written about timeless nature of life and death. I was taught from childhood that the cycle of life was sacred. My dad was a country doctor who delivered over 2,000 babies and cared for the sick and injured and held hands of many when they died. My mom was his nurse and taught me, by example, to love everyone. This gray book is from 50 years ago when I started it. I don't have some previous ones, but the very first entry is, what is life? It is the flash of a firefly in the night. It is the breath of a buffalo in the wintertime. It is the little shadow which runs across the grass and loses itself in the sunset. Crawfoot, he was the orator of the Blackfoot Conference. He lived 1821 to 1877. And I'm going to share with you several other things that are throughout my collection. You cannot play with the animal in you without becoming wholly animal. Play with falsehood without forfeiting your right to truth. Play with cruelty without losing your sensitivity of mind. He who wants to keep his garden tidy doesn't reserve a plot for weeds. Drag Hammarskjöld. Knowing yourself is the beginning of wisdom. Aristotle. Gratitude is the universal spiritual wisdom, and it is sufficient. Terry Patton. There is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. William Shakespeare. What lies behind us and what lies before us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us. Ralph Waldo Emerson. There is guidance for each of us, and by lowly listening, we shall hear the right word. Place yourself in the middle of the stream of power and wisdom, which flows into your life. Then, without effort, you are impelled to truth and to perfect contentment. Ralph Waldo Emerson. Reality is merely an illusion, albeit a very persistent one. Albert Einstein. A human being is part of the whole called by us universe, a part limited in time and space. He experiences himself, his thoughts and feelings, as something separated from the rest, a kind of optical illusion of his consciousness. This delusion is a kind of prison for us, restricting us to our personal desires and to affection for a few persons nearest to us. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty. Albert Einstein. And one more. The prophet Kahlil Gibran on death. You would know the secret of death, but how shall you find it unless you seek it in the heart of life? The owl whose night-bound eyes are blind unto the day cannot unveil the mystery of light. If you would indeed behold the spirit of death, open your heart wide unto the body of life. For life and death are one, even as the river and the sea are one. In the depth of your hopes and desires lies your silent knowledge of the beyond, and like seeds dreaming beneath the snow, your heart dreams of spring. Trust the dreams, for in it is hidden the gate to eternity. Your fear of death is but the trembling of the shepherd when he stands before the king, whose hand is to be laid upon him in honor. Is the shepherd not joyful beneath his trembling that he shall wear the mark of the king? Yet is he not more mindful of his trembling? For what is it to die but to stand naked in the wind, to melt into the sun? And what is it to cease breathing but to free the breath from its restless tides, that it may rise and expand and seek God unencumbered? Only when you drink from the river of silence shall you indeed sing. And when you have reached the mountaintop, then you shall begin to climb. And when the earth shall claim your limbs, then shall you truly dance. When I collected these poems, I knew nothing of Buddhism. Now looking back at my collection, perhaps I did. At age 13, my dad took me to watch him deliver a baby. During my years in juvenile and gestational diabetes research at the University of Virginia, I was present for many births because part of, besides working with juvenile diabetics in a clinical study where we brought them in a week or two at a time, and I taught medical students during that time clinical skills. Part of it was studying women with gestational diabetes, and we did these same tests on them, and then I was present at their deliveries, the births of their babies, to collect the placentas for histological study. And I personally have had 2 daughters, so birth is something I have had the beauty of intimacy with. Birth and death share features. The Sanskrit symbol for breath is a beautiful reminder to what comes naturally. This is a quote. It is the first thing we do when we come into this world, and it is the last thing we do when we leave. The baby doesn't know what life will be like outside the womb, and the dying don't know what the experience will be after the last breath. Death, like birth, is an emergence. There are many ways to meditate on death, and it has been a regular practice of mine for many years, even before it wasn't called a practice on death when I was a sophomore in college in 1972. My anatomy physiology teacher had made the assignment for the whole class that we would every day do something she taught us called conscious relaxation. And really, it is basically how to get out of yourself. And it is a form of meditation that I've practiced since then. And then there is the form of yoga, the most important pose of which is Shavasana, or corpse pose. From my first yoga class approximately 40 years ago, Shavasana has been my favorite pose. After all those poses of doing things, it's kind of like you live your life, and then it's akin to living life and getting to let go of all attachments in death. In Buddhism, the 8 stages of death, earth to water, water to fire, fire into air, air into consciousness, and consciousness into luminance, and luminance into radiance, and then radiance into luminance, eminence into, I think I messed that up, radiance into eminence, eminence into transparency, and then the reversed. We reverse because we're still alive and we're grasping, and so we wake back up. And we've done that practice in the Sangha together. And there are many practices for death, and they are important to do so that when our death comes, we will be able to let go of attachments and not panic when the signs of death are revealed, start happening, when breathing is difficult, our body grows cold, and our heart stops. But we've practiced, and so we remember our refuge and bodhicitta. Remember our path and see the mind going to a subtle state where we may have the opportunity to recognize emptiness and maybe non-duality. Personally, I prefer to do my death practice lying down, and that's one reason I decided not to do a death meditation with you all today. And I often do mine before sleeping. For me, the portals to letting go of self are gratitude, curiosity, and mystery. I want to read one of David Weitz's talks on gratitude. Gratitude is a passive response to something we have been given. Gratitude arises from paying attention, from being awake in the presence of everything that lives within and without us. Gratitude is not necessarily something that is shown after the event. It is the deep a priori state of attention that shows we understand and are equal to the gifted nature of life. Gratitude is the understanding that many millions of things come together and live together and mesh together and breathe together in order for us to take even one more breath of air. That the underlying gift of life and incarnation as a living, participating human being is a privilege, that we are miraculously part of something rather than nothing. Even if that something is temporarily pain or despair, we inhabit a living world with real faces, real voices, laughter, the color blue, the green of the fields, the freshness of cold wind, or the tawny hue of a winter landscape. To see the full miraculous essentiality of the color blue is to be grateful with no necessity for a word of thanks. To see fully the beauty of a daughter's face is to be fully grateful without having to seek a God to thank him. To sit among friends and strangers, hearing many voices, strange opinions, to intuit inner lives beneath surface lives, to inhabit many worlds at once in this world, to be a someone amongst all some other someones, and therefore to make A conversation without saying a word is to deepen our sense of presence and therefore our natural sense of thankfulness that everything happens both with us and without us, that we are participant and witness all at once. Thankfulness finds its full measure in generosity of presence, both through participation and witness. We sit at the table as part of every other person's world while making our own world without will or effort. This is what is extraordinary and gifted. This is the essence of gratefulness, seen to the heart of privilege. Thanksgiving happens when our sense of presence meets all other presences. Being unappreciative might mean we are simply not paying attention. For me, gratitude is a way for me to surrender self. I have found that fear and curiosity cannot coexist. Being with my dad during his dying process, my dad said, "I've held hands as my patients died, but I've never done it, and I'm curious." My dad never decided to, it's called VESDA, voluntary stop eating and drinking. And he never showed any sign of fear during the many phases of the dying. And this experience of being with his dying is another story, but was a stimulus for me to become a death doula. Prior to receiving teachings of the Buddha, Dorji Chan Buddha III, Panyawadi and Panyadipa, and the wisdom of the Sangha, I had been very content to abide in a place behind the veil of wisdom that these poems and quotes revealed, that others had glimpsed. I had a narrative that I was not smart enough or worthy enough to see beyond this veil, and I thought I was content in this state. And then I came across an article that I'm now going to share with you that ignited my curiosity. And to paraphrase Venerable's admonition, for those of you who are still believing you are not worthy, I'm done. I began to erase my narrative that I did not have the capacity to understand the quantum world and, yes, science behind this veil. So this is what ignited the next part beyond poetry. A student asked her cosmology professor the meaning of life, and here was his response. This was 2022, and Brian Thomas Swim. I had just finished my lecture on Einstein's special theory of relativity. The mathematical equations, one of his basic ideas, the so-called invariance of the space-time interval, filled the blackboards. I still had 20 minutes to spare. Perhaps I had galloped through the details too fast. I tended to over-prepare for this course since it was loaded with some of the best students on campus, including Ona Fitzgerald, who had scored a perfect 1600 on her SATs. We were on the 4th floor of the Thompson Hall, which had earned a nickname, the Boeing complex, because of its close relationship to the corporation and blah, 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 blah. I could have ended the class right there. My quota of chalk had already been transformed into the mathematical equations I had written out. I dropped the 3 leftover stubs into the wire mesh holder at the corner of the blackboard and opened the class for questions. Ona Fitzgerald raised her hand, her round, freckled face beaming. "What's the meaning of life?" she asked. This evoked tentative laughter, and she smiled as if she might have been joking. But after glancing around, she faced me again and waited. It would have been simple enough to avoid her question with a light remark, but I wanted to honor her sincerity. The bit of courage I needed came when I remembered Dr. Barker's response to the same question I myself had asked a few years earlier in my quantum mechanics course. His irritated reply, "Science doesn't deal with meaning," left me feeling foolish, as if no real scientist would ask such a question, only an amateurish pretender. Years later, and his words were still with me. As I leaned back on my desk and reflected on Ona's question, the strangest feeling arose. The students could see that I had taken the question to heart. The mood in the room shifted. A tingling grew inside me. It was as if unknown to me, I had been waiting for this. And yet, I felt like a criminal faced with a forbidden act, something that should be avoided, but that was too alluring to ignore. I told the students that I thought was important, what I thought was important, an important truth that almost none of us knew our true identity. Just as amazing, we forgot that we didn't know our own true identity. This strange situation came from the teeny worlds in which we lived. We thought of ourselves as Americans or Chinese or Republicans or Democrats, as believers or atheists. Each of those identities might be true, but each is secondary truth. There is a deeper truth. We are universe. The universe made us. In a most primordial way, we are cosmological beings. And then I said it. Quote, to take this in, you need to ride inside the mathematical symbols. I did not know what I meant by saying you need to ride inside the mathematical symbols. I just said it. Begin with the primal light discovered in 1964 by Penza and Wilson. This light is cosmic microwave background radiation, arrives here from all directions. We know that each of these photons comes from a place near the origin of the cosmos. So if we trace these particles of light backwards, we are led to the birthplace of the universe, which means, since this light comes from all directions, that we have discovered our origin in the colossal sphere of light. This colossal sphere, 14 billion light years away from us in every direction, is the origin of our universe, and thus the origin of each of us. I held out my arms as clutching a giant ball. We can speculate about what came before this colossal sphere, but I want to stick with the facts physicists have discovered. The empirical evidence points to a time 14 billion years ago when our universe consisted of a colossal sphere made of light, as well as the primal atoms of hydrogen and helium. That colossal sphere transformed itself into the stars and galaxies and everything else in the universe, known universe. I came to my answer to Ona's question. It says, as this sphere moves forward in time, it evolves under the action of expansion and contraction. That is, as the sphere continues to expand, particular subsets are pulled together via the attraction of gravity. This dual action of expansion and contraction set in motion the creativity that has given rise to every existing entity in the universe. If you want to know the meaning of life, look at your hand. Energy flows through your skin and bones without which you would freeze to stone. That flow of energy in your hand came from the beginning of time. Your hand grew out of the colossal sphere like a flower rising up from topsoil. No one in the history of humanity knew that the expansion and contraction of the universe transformed primal atoms into stars and galaxies. Nor did any person know the quantum field theory and the general theory of relativity that govern the sphere of light. None of the sages or kings had the slightest notion of any of this. But now we know the mathematical dynamics by which the universe brought itself forth. Those same dynamics are coursing through us. The universe's creativity is happening now. The exact same dynamics are at work. Our bodies churn with creativity rooted in a beginning of time. I stopped. I had worked myself into a trance. The words I had conjured up to explain things boomeranged back at me. In that moment, I felt the simple truth more deeply than I had ever had in the past. I was the colossal sphere. All of us were. We were rooted in the cosmic microwave radiation. We were the primal atoms speaking of our 14 billion year existence. Ona Fitzgerald sat in the front row. I did not want to make her feel self-conscious, so I avoided looking at her. But now it occurred to me that she was a Catholic. Did any of this disturb her religious faith? The students watched in silence. I knew something had happened. A strange intuition arose. The universe, held together by mathematical structures, was breathing me. But this thought too slipped away. The ending buzzer pulled me back. My ordinary consciousness reappeared and took control. Students gathered their books, dumped them into their backpacks, and left the classroom. Hadn't the world changed? I felt foolish, embarrassed. Attending to my lecture notes, shuffling them in this way and that, I pretended to be too busy to look up. As the students filed out, Ona came over smiling. She wore a simple yellow dress. She said, "I've decided to change my major because of your course," she said. "Really? You mean to physics?" She nodded. I was astounded. She was abandoning her music career. I knew how important music was for her because she had badgered me for months until I agreed to attend the fall show where she played the violin solo. After the concert, I met her family members, all of them proud of her musical competence and hard work. She had spoken with her family about this. Was this a good decision? What had I done? She attempted to say more, but stuttered. She stepped backward to the door and turning back said, "I love this. I would love to learn this. It's so, I don't know." Students shuffled up and down the hallway behind her. She shook her head and walked to the door. I thought of calling her back, but had nothing to say. So in our Sangha teachings, I struggled reading the supernatural accounts that we studied in the book Beyond the Himalayas by Murdo MacDonald Bain, and the stories of humans being in two places at the same time, being capable of lifting 2,000-pound objects with two fingers, moving through walls, having a consciousness that knows everything past, present, and future, and can move through time and to other dimensions and universes, and how our consciousness can live on after our bodies die. Basically, what a Buddha knows and can do. So it was with courage and enthusiasm that my fingers began typing into Google search words that appeared without me knowing exactly what I was looking for. Some of the articles and videos on quantum physics I found laid the foundation for an explanation of these phenomena that I had held to be impossible for humans. And they are for ordinary humans, but Buddhas are not ordinary humans, and science is beginning to show some. I would like to share some of the resources I found with you now. Now, my knowledge of physics is limited to basics of mechanical, chemical, and particle, the things I needed as a physical therapist. I never ventured into the world of quantum physics. Many of you may have extensive knowledge on quantum physics, and I ask for your forbearance until the end of my talk to share and illuminate us more fully. I will be reading parts of what has given me glimmers of understanding, so this information is not mangled in my words. We all know that the brain cannot be cut into to find consciousness, and that humans with brain injuries of many types retain consciousness. Russian-American Alex Virulov, I can spell it for you, but Viroulov, a futurist, evolutionary cyberneticist, philosopher of the mind, author, and filmmaker, states, arguably, consciousness is not generated by the brain. You can't get consciousness out of a piece of matter. Consciousness is fundamental and pre-exists our universe and manifests in everything that we think is real. If we assume that consciousness does not arise from the brain activity, as some neuroscientists still presume to be true, where does it come from? Some thinkers propose that local consciousness arises from non-local quantum processes at large, while consciousness is posited to be nature's sole ontological primitive. To use the metaphor of our information age, consciousness to humans is a cloud to computers. Just like your smartphone, your brain is a biological computing device of your mind, an interface for physical reality. Our minds are embedded into the greater mind network as computers are into the cloud. Viewed in this way, consciousness is non-local cloud. Our brain mind systems are receivers, processors, and transmitters of information within the cloud. Viroli goes on to say that just as species-wide mind networks are ubiquitous in nature, the consciousness may be the emergence of one global mind, that our human mind space is but a fractal of that larger cosmic mind. All mass, energy, space, time itself emerge from consciousness. Those are epiphenomenal consciousness, period. As author Eddington once put it in his Stuff of the Universe is mind stuff. So I've already been very brave, but hang in there with me. So the next thing that I found was consciousness after death. It's possible, says quantum physics, quantum immortality. There are practically hundreds of discussions every day about the prospect of life after death. It's a real open-ended topic, one that really doesn't have any real answers because we don't have the evidence to confirm or refute any hypothesis. According to Stuart Hemmeroff of the University of Arizona and the British mastermind scientist Sir Roger Penrose, awareness is but the equivalent of all knowledge contained at a quantum level within our very own soul. Awareness is but the equivalent of all knowledge contained at a quantum level within our very own soul or consciousness. The two researchers worked together to show that this quantum knowledge was carried by a certain factor known as protein-based microtubules, which are in the brain neurons. Their justification for why we do not verify or disprove anything in the first place is that all this knowledge plus more is held at a subatomic stage, one that we are unable to look for and study until recently, when things ended up shifting radically with the development of technology. When a human dies, the knowledge that they collect is released into the world by this microtubule that we described earlier. This information is transmitted back into the body's consciousness. So I think that I didn't type that correctly. Basically, what they've been able to see is that information on a subatomic level is stored in microtubules that they have found in the neurons of the brain. And that when we have near-death encounters, basically when life passes before your eyes, this subatomic material is released from the microtubules into the cosmos, but when you're revived, it draws back into your body and into the microtubules, is the theory, obviously, but there's beginning to have science find ways to follow this. And so we get a snapshot and an alternative world in which we died, but the knowledge is so vast that it overruns us. That's the life flashing before your eyes and forcing us to become immobile. This is the shock that we feel when we're too close to death. According to science, if this hypothesis is right, we're practically invincible. So that's something we should write home about. So what we know is out there. And then the next one is quantum theory proves that consciousness moves to another universe after death, or maybe one of the other planes that we know in Buddhism. The authors refer to biocentrism as how life and consciousness are the keys to understanding the nature of the universe. It is consciousness that creates the material universe, not the other way around. Dr. Robert Lanza, L-A-N-Z-A, Lanza, who was voted the third most important scientist alive by the New York Times, believes that life does not end when the body dies. He believes that consciousness exists outside the constraints of time and space, making consciousness able to be anywhere, both inside and outside the human body. In other words, this is a quote, it is non-local, which we spoke earlier of, in the same sense that quantum objects are non-local. This article goes on to state that the triggering factor for quantum worlds behavior is our actions. And that's why we study our thoughts, words, and actions so much. And quote, so there is abundance of places or other universes where our consciousness could migrate after death, according to the theory of neo-biocentrism. According to Dr. Stuart Hameroff, a near-death experience happens when quantum information that inhabits the nervous system leaves the body and dissipates into the universe. Consciousness resides, according to Stuart and British physicist Sir Roger Penrose, in the microtubules of the brain, which are the primary sites of quantum processing. Upon death, this information is released from your body, meaning that your consciousness is the result of quantum gravity effects on these microtubules, a theory which they dubbed orchestrated object reduction, or OR. Our consciousness is constructed from the very fabric of the universe and may have existed since the beginning of time, which makes our brains the receivers and amplifiers for what is being called the photon consciousness that is the fabric of space and time. Dr. Hameroff explains near-death experiences as the release of this quantum microtubule information that is recalled upon revival of the patient. This quantum information does follow Einstein's law that energy can be neither created nor destroyed. This account of quantum consciousness explains things of quantum consciousness, explains things like near-death experiences, astral projection, out-of-body experiences, and even reincarnation without needing to appeal to religious ideology. The energy of your consciousness potentially gets recycled back into a different body at some point. And in the meantime, it exists outside of the physical world on some other level of reality and possibly in another universe. I have always been curious about why I am different from all of my 5 siblings. When my Buddhist knowledge of the Gandhava combined with my genetics knowledge, I have now some understanding. I didn't know about the Gandhava before all of this study. I only knew facts of genetics, and I clung very tightly to that as the whole truth. So when I was conceived, the sister that is 2 years older than I am was in the pediatric ICU at UVA and not expected to live. And so my parents went home and decided to create another sibling for my oldest sister, so she wouldn't be an only child. And so she did survive, but I was created in conditions of when my parents were in trauma states of grief and fear. And when I think about the energy of Gandhavas out there, one was just waiting, I think. And my siblings were created under circumstances that weren't traumatic. And that may account for why I'm pretty different. So I wanted to finish with another poem, and that's Death is My Shadow. And I wrote this several years ago, As I emerged from my mother's womb, my light joined the light of the world. With it, my death shadow was cast. Death shadow exists because there is the brilliance of light's light. I do not know when the hand of my death shadow will lead me from this planetary life. Until that time, we shall dance together in this extraordinary light of love. On her 80th birthday, Pema Chodron said, "Every breath is a small birth and death." And she shared this prayer of her teacher, Chodron Trungpa Rinpoche. When the appearance of this ice, of this life dissolve, may I, with ease and great happiness, release all attachments to this life, like a son or daughter returning home. I would open up to comments and yeah. So I've gone, as you can tell, from being just a lover of poetry to, with all of the blessings of these teachings, to kind of erasing the lines of a Barbie box that I built and the world helped me build around myself, that I couldn't understand lots of things. And I don't know what my capacity is, but it seems to be evolving, luckily. And so I will continue to type into Google and try and learn more. So.
I thought those microtubules were pretty funny. They didn't try.
Is your microphone on?
Oh,
Yeah. Pardon?
Is your microphone on?
It is.
Okay, cool.
I was saying those microtubules were pretty funny. You know, the three kayas and the nature of mind is not only empty, but knowing, it's cognizant. And it doesn't have anything to do with microtubules. So, but it is, of course, fascinating to us as science explores from the outside in, you know, to keep discovering, approaching emptiness, you know, so. But the knowing part, that you had very fascinating exploration on your part to see, you know, how it's thought about, because, yeah, the subject of consciousness has always been a big puzzle. You know, I heard that the word consciousness didn't even exist until, you know, during Blavatsky and the Theosophists and that whole movement of the East coming to the West in turn of the century, whenever that was. And that's what I heard then, that the word consciousness came into being, that the language didn't have a word for it before that. So it's a puzzle, unless you have that direct knowing, you know, which of course is available. And so astonishing that how could that knowing exist? But it does, you know. And it's not you knowing. So, anyway, thanks for the topic. Yeah.
That's very rich. And
seems to me that that your life is a dance with the ineffable. Like poetry is an attempt to capture that which is uncapturable. And then also, like, I think having a front row seat to birth, you know, and the messiness of it and the beauty of it and the sacredness of it and like the unarmored open space that the transition of birth and death bring is I also what I'm interested in hearing from you is, like, I feel like you're a good balance of earthiness but also kind of toughness.
yeah.
You know, and the Dharma is right, like the Dharma is soft, but it's Dharma. When I say Dharma, I mean the living principle of providing what is necessary to help awaken in any moment, whether it's like structurally aligning somebody or having the empathy to be with somebody without having to have anything to add, to offer, to fix, to heal, you know? So like, what I'd be interested to hear is like, how did that come about, and what was that like? Was it a reaction to something? Was it something you saw embodied in your family? Like, has it been a refinement over time?
Well, like all humans, I've had suffering, and the lots of different experiences come to mind to share with you that I think created this strong back soft front kind of Tai Chi that I try to embody. And I can remember when I alluded to being different from my siblings, I have two older and sisters and two younger sisters, and then my brother is last. And everyone beyond the first two exists because the boy was wanted at the sixth and came along. The headlines of the local weekly newspaper said, John McClung has son. And my father delivered the last two babies himself. And when he delivered my brother, the nurse said, hand him to me before you drop him. And so it was a big thing. Everybody knew my parents wanted a son. And my father didn't tell anyone I was born for at least 3 days because I was another girl. And he came to love me and adore me, and I was quite a gift to him. As he said when he was dying, that if you want to have a good death, one of your daughters should be a nurse practitioner and the other one should be a physical therapist.
Yeah.
And so he had a very interesting, good death that some other time I could share with you. And it's a lot of what that experience of living brought to me. But some of the differences with my siblings, my eldest sister skipped the third grade, started school a year early, skipped the third grade, and was still valedictorian and president of everything. And it goes on like that. And then the next one was the one that was in the pediatric ICU, quite bright. She ended up getting her master's and stuff, but she was coddled and wasn't expected to make the same grades as the older sister. And she was the beauty queen. And really a lot of her praise in life and expectations were not the same bar my parents set for the rest of us. And then I came along with learning disabilities that they didn't even have names for. I can't spell, and you could tell how difficult some pronunciation was for me. And that's just my life. But it didn't keep me from having a wonderful career of over 40 years as a physical therapist. And prior to that, I had run a lab for the OR ICU, and I did diabetes research with children and women with gestational diabetes. And then I went on to become a PT. And, but it was always, I did a comparison. The sister below me by 15 months was also valedictorian, also brilliant. It goes on. And so comparison is quite an evil thing, but I didn't know it. And I didn't ever wish my siblings didn't have these things. I just wondered why I wasn't in the line, that the same line they were when it was all being handed out. And so it was really something that I wrote a narrative about of not being enough and not, so, but I over time realized that I had different things. My siblings above and below me in age came to me for Band-Aids. I think I've shared before. I don't know why. When I was probably 14 or 15, I was a candy striper, and they assigned me to the locked ward for dementia ward. And I was delighted and happy and couldn't wait every week to go. I felt very comfortable with these people, and then moved on into, and I'd seen death my whole life. My father would come home from delivering a baby, and we'd go, what was it? What was it? And usually it was a boy or a girl or twins, but he also didn't spare us from, sometimes life doesn't happen beyond the womb. baby was stillborn. And my father in this tiny little town trained a rescue squad and would go out on calls with them and come back and having just despondent and just holding space for having pronounced 5 members of a family dead. This was my life. People, because it was country and Dad wanted to spend some time with us and not always go to the office. He did a lot of house calls, delivered a lot of babies at home. You know, people were sewn up on our kitchen counter and fish hooks taken out. And once when I was quite small, Dad wasn't quite ready. We'd been swimming in the pool and he told me to go answer the door, let the patient in and have them sit in the dining room and tell them that he'd be there. And so I did so. I was probably somewhere, maybe 5, 6. And I did exactly what I was asked and came back and I was just shaking like this. And my dad said he knew what must have happened. And he said, just sit right here. I'm going to take care of this and I'll be right back. So I sat there and he came back and said to me, sweetheart, sometimes when life is being created, in the womb, there are mistakes. From one cell, a being gets created. And there's a lot of steps and things that have to happen. And sometimes things don't happen quite perfectly. And in this case, in the womb of the amniotic fluid, there are threads, and the threads had wrapped around this baby's arm. And so this mother standing there with a baby in one arm had a fetal arm on her other side. And I had no way of comprehending and understanding that at that age. And my father gave me this explanation. And he said, but she has a really full, wonderful life. And if you saw her in the kitchen as I have, grabbing the dish towel with that little arm and drying those dishes and stuff, you would realize that we're all very adaptable and we're not our bodies. We shouldn't limit what we think about ourselves as what our bodies can do and what they look like. And so that's how the kind of wisdom I was given throughout my childhood. And then, you know, other things happened. There were traumas through relationships and through disease of alcoholism of my first spouse. And so I can honestly say I've never hated. I don't, you know, whatever's happened to me, I've always usually looked, what did I do wrong? You know, what kind of, you know, and I also was able to have a view of, instead of why me, why not me? And so that's how I've kind of gone through life. And I hope that answered some of Rob's question. Jim?
Really want to thank you for this. This has really gone to a deep place for me. And one aspect of that, you're moving between poetry and quantum physics was remarkable. I mean, I've read poetry, I've written some poetry, I've dabbled in Brian Swim and some of the contemporary writers in quantum physics. And I'd never realized until you place those two categories side by side that they touch me in the same place. Quantum physics is its own type of poetry.
Wonder. Such a sense of wonder. I'm afraid I didn't get it right. But. Um. People can probably hear me. Nancy, I had written down, the microtubules. At the moment of your death, they release data. They release data into
Energy.
Oh,
It's-
energy.
It's
Okay.
basically information in the form of energy. That's subatomic, so we can't see it.
And I had asked, release to where? But then the next thing you said, as I understand it, is that there are many universes where that energy could have gone, many levels. And then that is maybe what forms the Gandhava?
That's my understanding, which, this is theory and but there's a lot of science behind it and the tools are being created to look at this stuff. And they even talked I have a lot more articles and a lot of wonderful stuff that I didn't include, but it's one of these things that they even believe that, I don't know if anyone saw the movie Multiverse, but basically it's there may be beings that are like Nancy in other universes at the same time. This was a way through quantum physics that really it shows that maybe there is past, present, and future, and why a Buddha or someone that has this kind of knowledge. I don't know at what level you have to be a Buddha to know of course, to know all of it, but what parts of it, that you may know the future before it happens. And that's just something that's still what I've tried to do in this practice is stop clinging to what I've been taught and always thought was true and concrete, and embrace not knowing. And actually, since I haven't thought real highly of my intellect, kind of embracing that has been an easy step. So it's actually a more comfortable place to be. And so
I gotta say, the family where your intellect is somehow subpar is a family that just scares me.
but that's, anyone else? Looks like we're gonna finish early. I was terrified it'd be 1:30. So, well,
How did you see the past and the future at the same time? So how does that happen in the quantum physics?
let's get a microphone. Thanks,
I
Bobby.
don't think I can see it.
You said, how does it happen?
How does it happen?
The past, present, and future at the same
The
time.
future, the past, and the present all at the same time, and explain to the quantum physics. I've seen people that can do that, but I just wonder, in quantum physics, how is it explained?
One of the not articles I read, and there's a video of it that I could share the reference to, that talked about how, because of the speed of light, we already know through quantum physics that Einstein had said the moon doesn't exist until you look at it, and that particles, when we observe them, change their behavior. And if something's happening and they're different observers, their distances and positions aren't the same as what they're observing. And so the speed of light that goes to the eye to receive the vision of what's happening is going to get to each individual person at some sort of measurable, not that I think matters, but apparently in quantum physics it matters, time, so that there really is no now moment. is the way I understand it. And believe me, I'm not, I think I tried to preface, I'm not a quantum physics professor, but so there's a past and a future, and depending on where you are and when light hits and you observe, that's somehow how they can mathematically measure. And that's why he said in that first thing I read that made me dive into Google, it's in the equations, the mathematical symbols. And Duffy, I wish I could elucidate it.
So you said that when the eye observes, for example, the moon changes? Is that what you just said?
I don't know that the moon changes. Einstein says that the moon doesn't exist until you look at it.
Right, so I've often wondered when people look at things, is there an energy that comes from our eyes that change things?
I believe that's why part of their understanding of why particles change when they're observed. You know, there's a slit experiment that they do with sending through atoms, and depending, they do one thing, and then if someone's watching, all of a sudden they're being recorded doing something different.
Correct. So there's that feeling that you're being watched. We have this feeling we put it together in our back or whatever. Oh, somebody is observing me. So how am I getting that? Are their eyes observing my back, and therefore I can feel the energy coming from their being able to vision me, to see me? So even in the animal world, if an animal is out there, they can feel another animal is watching them. So how do they know that? So I think that the eye gives, as it's observing, is giving some force force to observe, and that other person or other entities feels it somehow, or knows it somehow.
I've experienced that too, Buffy, and I don't know the science behind it to tell you, but I certainly know that we all have our own energy force fields, and some people's are huge.
Right.
And you can know before you even enter the room, you feel them. And you definitely know my experience in life, and I became very focused on it doing Tai Chi. I mean, that's right now, the energy is so strong between my hands. I think I could throw it across the room and move something, which I can't, but that's what it feels like. And I have watched masters of Tai Chi wanting to be challenged by these young whippersnappers who think, oh, I'm young, he's old, and I'll take him on. And they come at him, and they almost don't get as close as you are before he takes the energy that they're bringing towards him and takes his own energy and never even touches them, and they fly across the room. And there are videos of this. And
Young people are into their bodies and into their muscles, and this other entity, this other person, through age and experience, has this other ability.
to move that, his own energy, and meet their energy and shift where it's going to go. So, there are all kinds of examples that we've seen, and I don't know the science of how to explain it, but it's very real.
I think you've had a phenomenal, great father. You're really lucky.
I was, I can remember as a child, being very young, and he was doing chores outside, and he was filling up a bucket with water to, clean something. And he said, Nancy, watch this. And he put some water in the bucket, and he was 6'4", and he held out his arm, and he started spinning, and none of the water came out. And he said, Nancy, that's centrifugal force. And I was quite young, and my life was filled with all these things. And we talked medicine at the dinner table. There was nothing gory off limits. I have to be very careful when I'm a dinner guest.
Thank you for sharing your background. That's phenomenal. It's great. It all goes to make you what helped make you what you are now. But you're different because you are different. And that was and I like what you said. Why can't I always say I'm not better, not good enough, but then you just said it, but why aren't I? Of course I'm good enough. I'm always saying, well, I don't really believe it, and it can't really be true. I'm always questioning the things that have been given to me, when in actuality, well, for some reason, I've been given it, so yes, I'm worthy of it. So it's learning to gain confidence in oneself.
Confidence is so important. You're right, Bucky. When I literally graduated from college in 1975, and I knew in high school I wanted to be a physical therapist. But because of my narrative of not being smart enough and good enough, and it was so competitive, I worked for 9 years at the University of Virginia Hospital doing multiple things. First year out of college, I made $5,600 as a physical therapy aide, which you only need a high school education to do. Gained lots of experience that I couldn't have gardened any other way. And wouldn't apply to physical therapy school because, of course, I wasn't worthy and I wouldn't be accepted. And so after 9 years of these various jobs that I went from one, and I would just be approached in the hallway from someone in a different department and said, you know, we have this opening and we've heard good things about you and we'd like you to apply. And I would go, okay. And one job led to the next job. And I used to tell this story of, why was I such a coward? Why didn't I try earlier? Why did I waste all that time? But in hindsight, every single job I had working, they were all clinical. Everything built this repertoire of information that was so valuable to me as a physical therapist. And a lot of geriatrics. I had patients that had lost limbs, but also had diabetes, also had brain injury. There isn't any kind of problem that might not come to a physical therapist. And even before, you know, it's just incredible what I was taught by my colleagues but mostly my patients.
I think that most of my life I spent, I was programmed that I'm not good enough and that I was a bother and don't bother people. So I think that comes from our environment, from our schools, from our parenting, or whatever it came from. So that like the first 15 or 20 years of your life, you're told that you're not good enough, you know, and you're struggling to try to keep up, but you're not good enough, but they keep telling you that. But then finally, I got to the point where I had to prove that I was good enough. So in my area, I did crafts. And so once I achieved one thing, and then I achieved the next thing. And I didn't stay with one thing all the time. Once I got to the certain, well, I was happy with it, then I went on to the next item and the next item. And that's how I gained my confidence by teaching myself, being totally self-taught on everything I attempted to do until I moved on to the next thing. But it really helped me a lot when saying, well, why aren't I good enough? Why do I have to always question it? It's because of our programming, which is not right, and it's not right. Why can't he do what he wants to do? You can do anything you want to do. Do whatever you want. Thank you.
Well, I do think that we all have our unique gifts.
That's right.
And so,
Thank you for sharing.
thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I just want you to know that really it's beautiful to hear from you today, and intellect is intellect, but I love that you have the courage and the beauty to show up where it counts, at birth and in death. And it's so much courage and heart. And I think that's what matters. Yeah. So God bless you. Thanks for you.
I also wanted to say pertaining to like the quantum thing, like trying to figure it out and all that, like honestly, I think the first part of that is just seeing how we suffer in relationship to information outside of the sense spaces. Like we see something we don't like with contact, there's consciousness, with consciousness of feeling arises, and that's quantum physics from the inside. And then as we learn to tamp that down, and we begin to merge deeper with principles that are immanent in truth, the next layer and level is unveiled to us. And that's what the turnings of the Dharma are about. The first one is about really seeing the suffering that is inherent in the density of a human experience with all our programming and karmic patterning, you know? So whether we think we're good or we're bad, it's sort of still happening within the realm of a self that is suffering. And as we learn to tamp that down, the next level, which is what if I actually use this science of mind to unearth the secrets of the universe? And from that exploration to really serve. And that requires holding a different level of understanding. And that's where I feel like the Sangha is relative, you know? Like, that's why Panavati and all holism, like, there's a point where it's like, if we're still like, oh, what was me and this and that, it's like, then you're still stuck inside duality and you can't, like, time is not gonna, you're not gonna see the past, present, and future and how that can be of service. You think you're unworthy. And I'm not saying that as a judgment, I'm saying that as somebody who lived inside that paradigm and realized like just how it's unuseful.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean like the deeper layers of it don't come up sometimes when we have contact with something that makes us feel a particular way. And by the way, those are opportunities to practice. That's not like, and that's another turning of the Dharma wheel for us, where it's like, we have to see the challenges as opportunities to iron out the conduct and develop the scaffolding that can help us hold a higher level. And, sorry, I'm learning how to be a dad too, you know? One of the things that came up this week, honestly, that's that my wife is, her mother died of cancer when she was 3, and she herself has had cancer, and she has to go get these breast cancer screenings, you know? And man, if you have like breasts that have a lot of tissue density, and your mother had breast cancer, they put you through it. They poke you, they probe you, they want you to do MRIs. And every time she comes back from these appointments, her nerves are frazzled. And I grew up in the aggregate of action. Here's the plan. My father was a Marine. Like, here's the plan, what we're gonna do. We're gonna like go to a conference, we'll find some lady, and like, my wife's like, I just want a hug. You know, so I'm having like it's great that I can figure all that shit out intellectually, but it's like, it's not meeting her where she needs to be met. And no one did that in my family, right? So like, stumbling my way through that, you know?
What a gift that she's teaching you.
It's hard sometimes, like, we deal with problems with it all the time. Because I'm like, what are you doing? Like, you know, if you're afraid of death, like, should you be walking the path to the deathless? She's like, you're missing the whole ingredient in the cake, which is like just meeting me where I'm at, you know?
It's a great advantage.
Well, it's true, and it's like we go through this again and again, and then like I can talk about my program, which is no one taught us how to do that. Like my family, they're like, feeling what? Like, and with him, I'm learning, like, when I went to the pediatrician, they were like, he's feeling frustrated. You got to acknowledge his frustration first, and then you can, like, you know, move on to the next thing. So there's layers to all this, you know? And I want to make sure that we as a Sangha are mixing any ingredients in the cake. You know, we got to know what that is for ourselves.
He's laughing at Daddy with his.
But I think that
Yeah, he's like, he doesn't know anything. He gets-
And that is exactly why at the beginning, I thank the wisdom of the Sangha too, with all the venerable and the Buddhists. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, close with merit. May the merit accumulated from this practice benefit all beings equally. May all beings increase their fortune and wisdom, and may they always have peace and auspiciousness.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy.